Hey, folks, welcome back to The Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. It's 4:16 on Wednesday, the 13th of March. And welcome back. Wow. There's an expectation and then there's reality. It's what's called the expectation reality gap. And there's a gap, and there always is a gap. And folks, I'm sure whatever it is you're dealing with, it is difficult. And what do you do in these difficult times, right? We have certain expectations of how things will go in life. And I don't know if we're in agreement, but pretty much disappointment seems like a lot of the ways we see it. And it's really interesting to me if you followed any of the content that I've provided over the last 2 years. You know that I've ventured into the conversations around spiritual things. And I don't know if you know this, if you ever catch us on Friday at 11 o'clock Central for Right Side Up. My mentor, Steve Staggs, passed away suddenly. I've continued that on Fridays, but it's also been a really amazing experience because it continues to teach me. And when we're facing these troubles of many kinds, and there are many, I see out in the community, and I want to comment on this first before I give an update on the ecosystem, is there's a lot of people with certain expectations and they're disappointed, right? There's an expectation and then there's reality. And they're like, well, I thought this. And you know what? I feel like life is a lot of that, right? We deal with this. I thought it was going to go this way and it went this way. So that expectation reality gap is tremendously wide at times. And it's really interesting to me that we have this choice, right? We have choices to make of how we see this, this time, right? Some people are like, hey, I told you so, right? If you read Twitter, in a way, like I encourage you to get off of it. But I've had a number of people reach out to me and say, hey, what's your take on all this stuff with E-Hacks and P-Hacks and Richard Hart and all that stuff? And so I've gathered my thoughts and I decided I wanted to share with you just some thinking about this. And I think it's, it's one old guy's thoughts about it. Hopefully it'll be helpful to you. And then I'll give you an update on what's going on with the ecosystem because there's some pretty exciting things happening. But I want to start here. We are all dealing with something. Everyone. We have this idea that if you're the leader of the Pulse Chain ecosystem, if you're Richard Hart, you're like superhuman. And, what's interesting is what the benefit of community is we kind of recognize that everyone's kind of a beggar. We're one beggar helping another beggar find food. And what's really interesting is, in my own personal reflection, what always keeps coming back is this extension of grace that is really difficult for us to do. It's difficult for me to do. It's difficult for you to do. But it's like, all right, are you perfect? No. Is Richard Hart perfect? Am I perfect? No. And you kind of realize that, we're journeying in this plan. And when somebody passes away suddenly in your life, you realize it. You're like, yeah, I kind of take stock of what really matters in life. And, a lot of dealing with expectations and reality is a matter of perspective. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about kind of the spiritual centering or mooring is that it constantly is giving you perspective. And so that may seem a little bit nebulous to you, but that's the intro that I want to share. I want to remind you as we start today what the state of affairs really is. It's March 13th. We know, and we've been talking about for years, that the halvening is coming. I'm guessing it's going to be mid-April, right? Maybe April 19th, maybe 420, who knows? Let's remember where we are in this cycle. Let's also understand that we're in an ecosystem that has done things differently since the very beginning. I want to remind you that DeFi is not mainstream. DeFi, literally no centralized exchanges, right? Just individual people providing liquidity and individual people that are, making the market. And, if you don't know how to use a non-custodial wallet, or you're in a world of hurt. And I know this really well because we tokenize communities and these are no coiners. And I see it all the time. Boy, I tell you, there's a lot. There's a big, there's a curve that you have to go up when you're learning this stuff. It's steep. And so what I want to share with you today is a perspective on this ecosystem, and also kind of hopefully a leveling for us to look at this thing, I think, from the right perspective. Everything is changing in this world. We've heard so many people say that, volatility is the price you pay for the best performing asset. And it's like, well, I had an expectation that things would be like this, and I didn't know this or whatever. And everybody's like pointing fingers and I told you so. You've got to back up from it. I've got to back up from it, honestly, because it's overwhelming the emotion. And what's interesting is we know this when we look at the charts, that it is kind of it's tracking human emotions. Well, when you're in these situations, you realize, okay, this in time will also pass. We've gotten through difficult times before, and we'll move forward with the next thing. But it's a matter of having perspective. And I think that, there's a lot of confusion in the market and everybody's kind of devouring each other. And I want to remind us of the basics. And the basics are, we've always done things differently. And the thing that we have that's unique that others don't have is this community. And I think the community is really more of an aspirational idea, and we see it manifest itself in certain ways, right? I always talk about David Lee coming to my dad's funeral. That's a manifestation of something, right? Somebody that's considering others and, stepping out. We see this when we go to meetups or whatever. We see people and we realize their humanity. But what it takes, and what I think defines this community, is that we kind of let down our guard and stop in our position, and we say, I'm going to extend some grace, and I'm going to understand a person, right? I'm going to understand the situation. It's hard to do. I have a hard time doing it. You probably have a hard time doing it too. But I think what's really interesting is we don't understand a lot of times what the overarching big story is. So here it is, in my opinion. Everything is changing in this world, and there's a battle going on, and it's not between flesh and blood. What does that mean? You've probably heard that. If you're not somebody that's kind of been raised in the church, you know this. Well, what does that mean? The battle is not between flesh and blood. This is a real battle, and this battle is one for control and power. And the money situation sits at the very center of it. We got a guy like Richard Hart, who's not a perfect person, and he's not a god. He's a guy who's broken just like you and me. But he's decided to be an advocate for a group of people. And, we talk about having no expectations of anyone. I understand. But what's really interesting is this battle is not about this, this moment. It's the long-term battle. We live in a society and in a system that is meant to enslave you. The money, the debt, the structure of it is enslaving people with debt and consumer slavery. And I think many of the people that got into crypto and really are attracted to the Richard Hart ecosystem or any of this is somebody that understands that, hold on, we might have a shot to take this thing back. This may be our shot. Well, right now it's still immature, right? Everybody's like, well, this thing's pumping and my thing's not pumping. I wish my thing was pumping. I understand that. We've got to back up and look at this for what it is. This is our chance as a community to come together. And what does that require? So if it's a battle, how do you win this battle if you're the opposing force? You separate people. You get them to fight with each other. It's the classic example, right? This is the Marxism playbook. Pit one group of people against the other. And of course, they'll just fight it out. And so you just rile them up, shake the cage, if you will, and they'll just eat each other alive. What I think has to be how we overcome this is we have to stop for a second and get the perspective of really what's at stake. What's at stake is literally this potential shift in the entire financial system to one of abundance. Now, I'm pretty optimistic about things and also pretty naive, right? I want to believe that people can work together and win together. And sometimes you get in these situations where you're like, all of these, statements of, what Richard did or what they didn't do, or, all of these memes about, killing e-hacks or whatever it may be. You don't know what the future holds. But I think the general trajectory. Why'd you get in this stuff in the first place? You got into this in the first place because you saw a future that is not controlled by centralized parties. And that still is at the very, very core. So it's disappointing, I think, for people, right? They got into, they believed in this thing, and there's not a tremendous amount of clarity, and that's where the issues are. We don't communicate clearly, and we don't telegraph things the way, they should be telegraphed. And, we're trying to read between the lines, and some people are like, well, I understood it and you didn't, and you must be stupid. No, you're not stupid. This ecosystem that's built on the Pulse chain was built for a reason. Think about this for a second. The Ethereum blockchain was forked and is now the Pulse chain. It's properly decentralized, and it's got enough support. It's got tremendous amount of total value locked. It's got a lot of liquidity, and it's got a leader who's got a tremendous amount of resources. And, whether or not you like decisions that are made, I was not a big fan of twerking. Was not a big fan of some of the language. Wasn't a fan of, but that didn't mean I didn't see it for what it is. And that is, what is at stake is tremendous. And it's an opportunity that we have to literally be the last one standing. And so let me make that case to you, and then we'll get to this update. The powers that be in this world are continuing to drive to be more authoritarian, not less. What's happening in Canada right now with hate speech, what's happening with the TikTok bill and all of the things that are tied to that, things that are happening across the world, in the name of, globalism, or in the name of global warming, or whatever it may be, is that this heavy hand of authoritarianism is coming. But we have this option, and we see this hope of, what if we were to starve this war machine? Crypto has a promise, but it's not a technological solution, right? The promise of it is actually in the people, because we animate tools in a certain nature and character. And so as we look at the tools of the blockchain, we are extending our own nature and character in them. We're animating them. And what's so beautiful about this community is that, for the most part, the people animating it actually don't just want one Lambo. They're like, okay, I think I understand that if I consider others in addition to myself, we all win. But I really don't feel like I've been winning, and I feel like I take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and I'm kind of constantly comparing myself to all of these other things, and it just doesn't feel right. And I would say to you, it's darkest right before they turn on the lights. We're not to the halvening yet. We're in an ecosystem that is not OFAC compliant. It's not centralized control, and we have a founder who will not bow to anyone. And, that comes with its challenges as well. But here's the thing. You've got to roll with it. And what does that mean? Well, my expectations and reality. I mean, you have choices to make. You can get in or out. I'm going to tell you where I'm at. I still believe in the future of us controlling the money for ourselves, having self-custody, being able to do transactions, having freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of privacy, and freedom to transact. And I want to advocate for that. And that's what our whole ecosystem is about sovereignty and enabling people to take back their personal sovereignty. And a big part of that is the financing to do it, the money. Never before in human history have we been able to do this, where political power and financial power have been separated, and we literally can declare our own value. It's just like fiat currency. Fiat currency is just basically our agreement. Well, we're doing that in this community as well. With all of these different tokens that you like, we're declaring our own value. And that's such a big idea, because it hasn't happened before. And now with technology, and now with the coming of AI, the truth is actually being exposed, and you're seeing this thing writhing in pain, right? You're seeing this thing push back. You're seeing, the centralized players trying to take over Bitcoin, and they likely will. And we will likely have to, as Axes Alive said, we're going to have to likely sacrifice Bitcoin on the altar of decentralization. Like it's going to be taken over. But what is the hope if we don't have a vision? And to me, leadership is so important. And the reason I held back of saying anything about what's going on is that I realize we have to have a view and a perspective of this whole thing. And what is the view in this perspective? Well, it's got to be fundamental to accomplish what we're accomplishing. And, we see on one hand, people want to manipulate and get mine at your expense. And frankly, that's the old system. And I don't know if we can, lead each other to a better land, a better place, a land flowing with milk and honey, if you will. But I know that it's going to come through working together, considering others in addition to ourselves, and recognizing that if we want to experience a future of abundance, we have to have the rails to run on. That's the promise of the pulse chain. The pulse chain is not going to compromise its principles. Why? Because Richard Heart's not going to compromise his principles. A decision has been made clearly, and it's been telegraphed that this is where the value is going to be. And so whatever you think of the eHex commentary, it's not going away. It's an immutable contract on the blockchain, and people are still going to get yield, right? This Denkin update with Ethereum, what did it cut it in half? That's not much benefit to the value or the cost of gas fees. So they didn't fix that problem. But this thing marches on. We have an ecosystem that I think, as these other founders and these other chains and everything make deals with the centralized players, they're going to become less relevant because the heavy hand is going to overwhelm people. It's enslavement. And can we be a part of supporting an ecosystem that actually gives people more freedom and more ability to move, to speak, to transact? This whole thing is going digital. The whole thing is going digital. And in this process, where is our economic energy going to be stored? And I want to store it in a place that represents my values. And so as you look at this, most people are like, well, no, let's just manipulate the system and get mine now. Well, that's the problem with the old system. The old system is one that enslaves. And what do? We manipulate things to get mine at your expense. And I feel like if there's anything that Richard Heart understands, is that, well, if the community is the legacy, then the system itself has to be good for everyone in the community. And so what are the rules to that? Well, the rules to that is not your keys, not your coins. The rules to that is immutability. The rules to that is truth in the transaction. The rules of that are one in which we preserve your right to choose, your right to speak, your right to move, your right to have privacy, the right to transact. Where else do you see that being protected? You could make a case that Charles with Cardano might be somebody that might be, kind of in this vein, if you will. But folks, the political winds and the social winds that are moving are leading us into more and more of a crisis time where there's more and more control. What I love about this ecosystem in this community is we have all the building blocks for tremendous amount of value, but also hope. It's hope for people who are dealing with think about pensioners and people that are on fixed incomes that have to get extra jobs and figure things out. The people that are really struggling in this world. Where are you going to get a chance, right? And crypto represents that potential chance. I think everybody wants it now. They're like, well, why didn't it go up after the Pulse chain launched? One thing Richard Heart understands is the timing of these things. And he's made that pretty clear. We are not to the halvening yet. The economic energy is being pushed to the Pulse chain. We're doubling down there. Okay. As I look at things, prices are still pretty darn cheap. Richard Heart is sitting on a tremendous amount of resource. And what has he shown in a brilliant move is getting yield. Where is he putting the stable coins? He's putting them in a place where it gets yield. Monthly, $800,000 a month? What would that do for this ecosystem? But here's the thing. The people that don't see it, that are looking just, they're very, very nearsighted and they don't see very far. They're just looking at what meme coin is pumping. The Pulse chain is going to be here for a long time. And these contracts are going to be here for a long time. But what we're building is actually something that will become so obviously an alternative to the current system. It's going to be shocking. But right now, people don't know how to discern between those things. They're like, oh, well, everything's kind of the same. And why is my thing not pumping? Folks, wait. Be patient. Richard Heart wants the glory. What does that mean? That means that there is no question at all that the things that he made are the things that the things that have literally transformed lives. We know about Hex, 623 days, 10,000x. Okay. What about Pulse Chain? What about Pulse X? What about Inc? What about Hex? What about these things? Hart's Law is real. The resources are there, but there's going to be a point in the future, right? And the benefit goes to us who see this trend and see this thing before it happens. And that is everything else is under attack. That prevailing wind of sovereignty and freedom is something that that is so knit into the human heart that when you don't have air to breathe, you literally go into this direction. And what that means is we're going to be standing here with your ability, with no limits to your transaction ability. You know, it's like what Elon Musk has done with X. Like, people are so upset. What do you mean you can say anything you want on the X platform? Right? We have to restore that. Well, this is the financial equivalent to that. A place where you can actually do these things. But right now, it's hard to prove to somebody who's getting massive returns in something with a hat, right? That's the latest meme. Whatever it is with a hat. Folks, it's got to get much worse, and it's going to. But we're still going to be standing here. Why? Because of the true tenets of DeFi are the things that we stand upon. And to see this economic energy, you know, people being upset about, you know, the current state of affairs, I get it. I understand. However, you got to remember why we are here in the very first place. It goes all the way back to that. And here's the thing. Richard Hart gets this. You might not like certain things. I haven't liked things in the past, but here's the thing. I understand the trajectory of this thing. And the trajectory of this thing is it will be an alternative to a system. It will be a free alternative versus one that enslaves. Because as we see things go digital in the CBDCs and folks like XRP and all of them getting the rights to do the CBDCs, it is going to be so stark in its contrast that this is going to be the only place. They're literally going to choke it to death. So I think it's worthwhile. I think Richard thinks it's worthwhile to advocate for people's freedom and sovereignty. So that's what I have to say about this current situation. I'm not going to wade into like who's right and who's wrong and I told you so or not told you so, because actually this will pass as well. And what we're going to see is the excitement of the happening. We're going to see things go crazy. And then we're going to see the plan of Richard Hart. We've seen a foreshadowing of it. But folks, people go where the money goes. And right now it seems quaint and it seems like, well, we don't have what they have. Stop comparing yourself, understand where we are and understand what's at stake, and understand that somebody has to lead in this way. Someone has to create a chain that is literally not controlled by centralized parties. Hex has never been on a centralized exchange, right? So with that, hopefully that's helpful to you. But there's an expectation that we all have, and there's reality, and there's always a gap. The question is, what are you going to do in that gap? What are you going to do with that? And I believe, because the battle's not between flesh and blood, that we've got to stop fighting with each other in the foxhole, and we need to see and remind each other of why we're here. And when I see that when it's a meetup, Hex meetup, Pulse Chain meetup, whatever it means, Texan meetup, is I see people and look them in the eye and I go, wow, you are a valuable person. And I think that that's what we got to remind ourselves of, is that what I love about this community is the fact that there are people who want to give, right? We don't have any influencers in our community that are getting paid to do it, right? That's how that other group works. We're defined by how different we are. And we're really defined by how much we care about each other. Now, are there people who love the drama and love to fight? Yes. But this is different. And it's part of the reason that you're here. And I feel like in these times where there's all this, carnage and confusion and fighting and all this stuff, somebody's got to step up and say, listen, folks, let's remember why we're here, right? I want it now. I want an Oompa Loompa, and I want it now. Folks, I just want to say to you, I appreciate you. I appreciate the fact that you're sticking through this. It is a tough time, and there's people that are struggling tremendously. We've got to extend grace to each other, and we've got to move forward together. We have to. That's the only option. Now, I understand if you're upset, but here's the cool thing. It ain't even started yet, folks. Relax. It's going to be okay. We're not even to the happening yet. That's the problem. I watch all this content too, and I get all worked up. And if I spend time on Twitter, I'm like, it's crazy. All right. With that, let's say hello to you in the chat. And then I'm going to get into an update. It'll be a quick update on our ecosystem. There's some pretty cool things happening with our tokenization of communities, our Freedom Swap update, which is a DEX, and give you kind of some updates on what's happening within our ecosystem. And this is the Texan, Ophir, and some other kind of cool things, who we're talking to, what our next community is. And I want to give you some hope and encouragement, because we are fortifying freedom and sovereignty in this world. 345 your keys, your crypto NFT first. What's up? Good to see you. Taryn, looking forward to the update. Have a blessed one. Absolutely. Ego Foundation, hello to you. Pulse Bean OC, Ramon Carrillo, David Lee, all the way from southwestern Indiana. Quentin Cold, H2O, what's up? John May, Pulse Bean, Magnus, Rich Liberation, Robert Keller. Good to see you guys. And by the way, the reason I do this is because I love it when people, when I'm on streams, I'm like, hey, and they're like, hey, Crypto Heartbeat, how you doing? What's up, Robert? J-Pon, Tintob, Timothy Harris, Afternoon Crypto Heartbeat. Bless you, Miss Steve. Absolutely, man. I miss Steve so much. Hey, Hex on Air, what's going on? Please like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate that. Been on hold for years. For me, it's time, not mine, with. Absolutely. Fantastic. Lots of bumps on the road towards victory. Amen. And, you know, in a way, I was dealing with a really, really difficult time. And then, of course, Steve passed. And I literally realized, you know what? Why does it say in the Bible, consider it pure joy when facing troubles of many kinds? You know, and why would I pray? Because you know what? I don't have the strength, right? I've got to recognize that, you know, I'm limited, but I also have hope that there is a plan, and it's for our good. Nabil Steele, dude, you haven't been around forever. Nabil Steele's back. We're still super early. I could not agree more. And think about this. I don't know how old you are. You're likely not as old as Crypto Heartbeat. Maybe a couple people are. But you got your whole future in front of you. And think about this. How many more cycles you got to go, right? Everybody wants to, like, I want to get it now. Relax. It's coming. It's coming. You're living at the greatest time in human history because of all of this volatility. I left the Gentle Ginger Giant for this update. What's Mike clipping a little? Thank you, Nabil Steele. Thank you so much. I'm speaking too loudly. I appreciate that. Not been in the stream for a year or so. So happy. What's up, Zoe? God bless you, man. Crypto Heartbeat. Thanks a lot. MTV Coiner. Good to see you. Hexodium. Let's see who else is here. Swissverse. He's not a god. What are you talking about? Airto. What's up? Hex Force 1. Liberty or Death. I'm in the best protocol with the best people, starting with you. Thanks, Tim Harris. I appreciate that, man. We're just all working together, trying to make it. We're gonna make it. Yeah, I don't like how it fluctuates on Richard's tweets, but that just goes to show you how important a narrative is, right? It just goes to show you this is what did he say? Richard said it's a shared fiction. That's what a meme is, right? It's a shared fiction. And this fiction isn't a doggy logo, right? We've got something of real substance, and that is really the future of the monetary system. And you got to realize what we're setting up. Like, we're setting up an alternative. Unchaining the captives, legacy systems, winning hurts sometimes. Yeah. All without risk. What's going on, everybody? Let's see who else is here. ASMR Dreamscape. Let's see who else. I just want to make sure I'm saying hello to you, and then we'll get into this update. Thanks for being here. We're so good and on our way. Amen to that. All right, cool. I think I got it. And Active Emaciated. What's up, buddy? All right. So here's the deal. So you probably saw from, or if you've been paying attention to our ecosystem, obviously we launched Texan. And when we launched Texan, that was with a donation phase to the Texas Nationalist Movement. 500,000 people membership. And so our whole point is, how do you educate and help people in that ecosystem become a part of this Pulse Chain ecosystem? And I have one great piece of news to report. Things are really going to heat up with that group because we've made an agreement with the TNM. And what's so cool about that is more and more people from their community, which they gained hundreds of thousands with this last petition drive for the Republican primary, that we're going to see a lot more people coming in, not only because of the timing, but because of some of the decisions that they've made. So Texan and our tokenization of that community and the benefits to those who believe in Texas independence is moving in a really good direction. And so I'm really excited about that. And you're going to see some announcements from us as it relates to that community coming up soon. But these are developments that we've been hoping would happen for the last year, and they just happened. So I'm very excited about that. So we're going to see a lot more new people coming in from that community. And here's the thing, that community skews older, right? Those are folks that are around Crypto Heartbeat's age, but those people have resources too. And so really excited about that. So that's number one. That's kind of the Texan update. Ophir Crypto, which you're aware, continue to bring churches and groups on. I'll let Firestarter, who's the founder of Ophir Crypto, kind of give you the updates on those, in detail. But that's another community out of the Philippines that we tokenized, and it continues to be on the Pulse chain and continues to go, and is continually bonded with Pulse and PulseX, which is good. But here's a really cool thing, the update on Freedom Swap. So we are forking Uniswap v3, and so we are well on our way to having that complete. And so we anticipate that Freedom Swap will be launched this summer. Okay. And so summer in Texas is like, May, that's not for most people, but May, June. And so really excited about that. That's been delayed. And now that we're in this timing, we want to get Freedom Swap out. And so what is it going to be? Freedom Swap will be a decentralized exchange, a V3 Uniswap fork with, and we're crossing our fingers on this one, with limit orders. And so we're really excited about what that does for this community. But I think one of the big things I'm going to hold off on telling you is the incentive that goes along with that. So I'm going to hold that back. Rags and I will probably share that big piece of news soon, but we will have the decentralized exchange launch this summer. The other big update on the ecosystem is our latest community. We're having a conversation with the English Constitution Society, which is English Exit. So if Texit is Texas independence, we're talking to the folks across the pond with English Exit. You remember Brexit, right? So this is England itself and its movement to be independent. And we're really excited about that. That's advanced as recently as today. And so that will be our next community that we tokenize. And that's England. Can you believe it? And if you've been paying attention to my channel, you've met Graham. We met him at the Texit Con, which is the conference for Texit. But we're excited to move forward with that group. That's a huge community, a ton of engagement. And so that's going to be another group. But those are going to be new people that don't understand crypto, and we're going to have to help bring them up to speed. But it's so cool to see that as people in the Netherlands or the people in Canada, or people are being locked down, or they're being the heavy-handed government, and here we are, we actually have a lever to pull, and it's coming together in community, tokenizing those communities, and declaring our own value. And so really excited about a new community coming on. That will be community number 3, which is very, very exciting. In the past, we've talked about an incentive token called Unifier, and we haven't decided exactly what we're going to do with that token. There's been some incredible tokenomics discussed about how we incentivize LP providers across the Pulse chain. We've talked about a lot of things. So that's, kind of on hold right now. Our main focus in this ecosystem is to launch Freedom Swap as soon as humanly possible. And that is going to be, we want to get it done as soon as we can after the halvening. Okay. So that's going to be, tremendous. And I think what you're going to be excited about is Brandon from Rags to Riches is a freaking genius, and his thinking, he's really paid attention to, and understands the liquidity providing side of things, and has brought some really innovative ideas on how to incentivize folks on a DEX. And so that will be Freedom Swap. But the cool thing about this is As we look at our projects are not about trying to grab money from the current ecosystem. We're not trying to get people inside of this community to jump onto the, Tex and Ophir and these things. That's not it. What we're trying to do is to go out to communities that already have trust. They already have a group of people, right? T&M's got 500,000 people. The English Constitution Society's got a bunch of people. Looking at 5,000 churches and more in the Philippines. These are people that are no coiners. They don't have any idea. And we're basically saying, hey, this is a way in which you can have something of your own. And so that's the idea. The contract that we have is our endowment contract token, which has staking and scraping. It's all the same approach, but bringing those things to these communities. And to me, the hardest thing to do is to get somebody to care about your project. And so instead of us trying to market what we're doing to every random person, we're saying, no, we're going to literally go directly where the trust already is, where the community already is, where the people already are, where they already have a bond, where they already have a cause. And we're going to bring them the gift of declaring their own value and doing that on the Pulse chain. So folks, that's why we just got to realize. Now watch this. Can you imagine what it's like? Can you imagine you're somebody that's in a community in England, or you're somebody that's in Texas or in the Philippines or anywhere, and you're just learning about crypto today, right? Can you imagine that? Like what that's like? It's got to be incredible because they don't realize the cycle and where they are. Folks, this is, what is Richard Hart's top call for Bitcoin? What did he say? 241.5? 241,005 is what he's kind of said is the next top. And that's probably just a percentage, he's figured that out. You imagine, just try that on for size. Bitcoin at $241,000. What does that mean for Ethereum? What does that mean for all of these things? And that's kind of the natural progression of things. That's not this disproportionate protection of the price from SAC money plus other money and a guy whose desire is to get the glory. So it's almost like I want to talk you off of the ledge. It's going to be okay. But you know what? Without these risks, without these challenges, it shakes out the people who don't get it. And in a way, that's what I kind of like. I don't like people that I care about being harmed. I don't like people being disappointed. I don't like people in pain at all. But the promise of this long term is incredible because it's an alternative to the financial system. I don't see anyone else. Everyone else is kind of building in the old model, which is one of extraction and enslavement. And it's interesting to think that, could we be the place that's going to be teaching people about DeFi? I mean, how many more FTXs do we have to have? How many BlockFis? How many Celsiuses? How many of these things do we have to have? And of course, Richard's been saying that for years. But to think that we'd have a place where there are good, thoughtful people who are promoting the right stuff. And that's what I think is really interesting is we've had people come into this community since the Pulse chain is launched to try to scam it, right? To try to take advantage, people trying to come in and take. And there's an interesting thing. It's almost like, I think Rags talks about it being, it's almost like we are, what did he say? It's like we're an antibiotic, right? These people come in and, we vet them and we say, all right, well, we've established there's kind of a way to do this, right? You don't come in and you pay people. You don't manipulate the system. You come in and you're doxed. You've got, your proper audits, all of the things that are kind of hallmarks of, above board, truthful, fair, appropriate things. And then you get to make your own decisions up. And so you don't have a bunch of people in the Pulse chain ecosystem who are getting paid by projects to shill. There's a couple of them. But you got to be aware. I don't get paid to do this. Rags doesn't get paid to do this. I mean, I would say 95% of people don't get paid to do this. That's very different than the normal crypto world, right? The normal crypto world is I would build a group, a paid group, and you guys would pay me something monthly to come into my group, and I would go hustle deals, like find projects, right, that want to launch in the Pulse chain. And what I would do is I would say, all right, come into my Telegram or whatever, and I'm going to give you advance notice on when this thing's going to launch. I'm going to get some sort of pre-allocation, or I'm at least get insider information. And then I'm going to tell all of you about that. I'm going to collect money from you and I'm going to give you that. And we're going to literally go steal from other people. right? Because what we're going to do is we're going to hype this thing up. We're all going to buy together, and then we're going to sell into the launch. That's how we're going to skim this money off. Folks, that is not truth in the transaction. That's not the way that it's meant to be. I'm not here for that. Now, may you make some money? Yeah, you certainly could. But I feel like what we're building here is the promise of something else, because if it's truly going to be an alternative, it's not going to be a repeat of this old system. And this old system is manipulated by centralized parties. What is it when somebody has a paid group and brings all their people in and gets insider information and says, hey, let's go screw everybody else? It's an old system. The promise of this and the community of this is, and I feel like we're doing it the hard way. That's why it's painful, right? And everybody's like, oh, that's just, no. Relax. It's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. So, with that being said, I'm really excited about an additional community coming in with England. We're going to talk to you about that. We'll share with you what that specific is once we get things lined up. Freedom Swap this summer, early summer, as soon as we can after the halvening. Really excited about that. And the unique tokenomics and the unique approach that we're going to take to rewarding liquidity providers and building value and utility in our ecosystem. That's exciting. And let me help you with this one as well. Do not ever forget about bonded liquidity. If Richard Heart believes in his babies, and what are his babies? Hexon Pulse Chain, PLS, which is Pulse, Pulse X, and the incentive token. Okay. Those things are all bonded together, and then our projects are all bonded with those. So if you recall, and you watched the last cycle, what happened when we were paired with ETH? When ETH went up, so did Hex. And then there was also people in the background making sure they protected the price. They were very aware of what was happening. The same thing is going to happen again, right? Richard Heart knows and has a plan. And that plan is on the Pulse chain. And that plan is going to attract so many people, because what will end up happening is, I think not just Green Candles are going to advertise it. I think it's everything that's happening in the world with centralized players trying to clamp down on crypto, and the inevitable digitization of money will show it to be an alternative. Is it going to be more than one cycle? Yeah. Do I want to be like, I want to be a billionaire by, in 12 months? I get it. But what's funny is, when I first got into crypto, I remember thinking like doubling your money was a good thing. You think about it like, hey, yeah, you double your money. That's really good. And now people are pissed on a 25x. Oh man, that's terrible. Isn't that funny? Like, think of our perspective and how it's changed. What an amazing time to be alive. And not only we could accomplish this idea of, hey, we could have significantly more resources, but also imagine if we could have an alternative to the existing financial system. Because in my opinion, this whole thing is a poison pill that the centralized people are taking. They have an insatiable desire for yield. And where are they going to get that yield? Well, the only place to get it is in crypto. And so what are they doing? They're taking their own, they're consuming the pill that will kill them. And why? Because they can't help but get this growth. They can't help but get these gains. And so all this money is going to come over, and a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's not even considering what Richard Heart's doing with SAC funds or other funds, or, what is it, the Spark stuff, or what is it, MakerDAO yield. Folks, I was there in the last top of this last bull market. It's almost like we've forgotten what it's like. We're not even to the halvening yet. It's okay. It's okay. But let's remember why we're here. Right? There's pain that is temporary. There is a shock between the expectation and reality. But it's, in a way, we just have to endure it and support it for what it's accomplishing. And I would say, don't participate in the extraction model. Participate in the abundance model. And a lot of that comes about by considering and advocating and thinking about others in addition to yourself. And strangely, that's exactly what Richard Heart's been doing since the very beginning. Why would he want to be protecting people from rug pulls and, paid group shillers? And why would he want to be protecting us from, not your keys, not your coins, or whatever it is, right? Don't give away this stuff, right? Hold it yourself. It's at its core, and it's a fundamental advocacy for the betterment of you, and that consideration that's aligned with my values. How do we animate this tool of the blockchain called the Pulse Chain in the nature and character of goodness? And we align it with the way that basically we all win together and no one is feeling like they got taken advantage of. I don't even know if that's possible, but at least we have to imagine that it's possible or it won't happen at all. And so we're in a foxhole fighting a battle. It's not between flesh and blood. So stop pointing the gun at the other person in the foxhole. Our enemy is out front. Let's move forward and support this ecosystem of freedom and sovereignty and recognize that it's not going to run with cat with a hat or dog with a hat or any of that stuff. It's not the same thing. It's something different. And it is aligned with reality and truth and real value, which is people's sovereignty. So if you want to look at it and you're like, well, what's the utility? The utility of the Pulse Chain is personal sovereignty, freedom to transact, freedom to move, freedom to speak, freedom of privacy. And I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I don't believe that Richard Heart will compromise his principles by doing some deal with the World Economic Forum or Visa, right? He's going to march to this drum. He's going to support these things of independence because here's the thing. There's no glory unless we win. So once again, Richard Heart, he doesn't get the glory unless we win with him. And those are the moves that he's making. And sometimes it's painful, but at the end of the day, we have ourselves the elements of a vertically aligned ecosystem that he's talked about for years. And it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And we're really excited to be a part of it. And my last comments is this. If you're somebody that's building on the Pulse Chain, one, thank you for doing that because you're adding to the value. I look at this, I don't look at this as competition. I look at this as another line in the water from our deep sea fishing. We put lines out to catch fish, and every project that's out there is going to have an attraction to someone else. And so rather than being competitive, it's actually beneficial to attract. It's another shiny object out there that people can see. But the more and more we have people that understand the essence and the ethos of this community, the more we're going to attract real, thoughtful people. And they're going to go, you know what? I see what you're talking about. And to me, who's going to do it if we don't, right? And I'm just thankful that there's a guy like Richard Heart that's willing to endure these kind of attacks, right? Is he perfect? No, none of us are, right? Thanks for joining the Pulse today. My name is Matt. Really excited about the future. Don't let your heart be troubled. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.